Predicting Parent Experiences with Co-Resident Adult Children by William S. Aquilino. So in this article, he starts off by talking about how there is an increasing proportion of adult children living with their parents, and that the age of leaving home is increasing, and more and more adult children are returning home after leaving as well. He says that despite this increasing in numbers of boomerang kids and co-residency, that there is still very little known about adult children's effect on parents' lives prior to leaving the home. And he says that in this study, he will be examining the implications as perceived by parents of having a co-resident adult child, and that the objective of his study is to describe child, parent, and family structural factors that influence parents' perceptions of how the co-resident living arrangement affects their lives. So basically, in this study, he will be examining how parents perceive the living arrangement when they have an adult child co-residing with them to be, and how these perceptions can be correlated to different factors about the specific living arrangement. So then he goes on to the literature review, where he says how there's considerable evidence that the co-residence of adult children affects parents' quality of life, and that there's research out there that proves that parenthood and well-being at any age, having children in the home has negative consequences for the parents. He also goes on to say that there's also research that shows that raising children has been associated with lower parental happiness and life satisfaction, and that having higher levels of psychological distress for both men and women. He then goes on to say that other research has showed that the impact of adult children's leaving home may depend on the level of parental distress prior to the children's departure. He also provides an example for this, and says how parental distress can be associated with a child moving out, which was significantly higher when parents had reported low levels of parental problems prior to the child's leaving. He goes on to then say how there is an extensive and growing literature concerning the impact of parenthood on psychological well-being, marital happiness, and life satisfaction, and that the changes in these indicators associated with the launching and empty nest transitions. He says that for the most part, the research out there about this subject has focused on parental status as the key predictors of well-being. So whether they're a parent or a non-parent, or if they're in the empty nest phase, or if the children still lives at home, and focusing on these factors as predictors of the well-being of the parent. But he then goes on to say that this focus is way too narrow, and that the present research suggests that parental well-being is not merely a function of the presence or absence of children or the age of children in the home. He says that there is need for research that describes parents' experiences before adult children leave home, which is a stage of parenthood that he thinks has very little research on. He says that the purpose of his research is to explore the factors that mediate the impact of unlatched adult children on parents. Then he goes on to talk about his methods, which is how he studied and examined that, which is as follows. The data in the study was taken from the National Survey of Families and Households, which collected detailed family life interviews from 13,017 respondents drawn through a multi-stage area probability sample of the United States. The interviews in the study were averaged about 102 minutes in length and were conducted from March 1987 to May 1988. In these interviews, it was one respondent per household that was randomly selected from residents ages 19 or over. The analysis reported here are based on the reports of 4,762 respondents who were parents and who had at least one child or stepchild aged 19 or older. So basically, in this study, they took a previous study which had 13,017 respondents, and they took from that number 4,762 respondents who were parents and had at least one child or stepchild aged 19 or older living with them. And of these 971 parents had a co-resident child. Of these, 971 parents had a co-resident child aged 19 or older. And also, all the parents with a co-resident adult child were asked to complete the self-administered interview segment concerning relationships with the co-resident child. So basically, that is how they conducted the study and gathered their research. So now, on to the results. This study examined the selection factors that influence the probability of co-residence and the factors that mitigate parents' perceptions of how co-resident adult children affect their quality of life. So in the study, they found that the net of the children's age and marital status, the presence of unlaunched adult children, and the presence of unlaunched adult children were more likely when home conditions were conducive to positive parent-child relations. They also found that the parents perceived the living situation as a good thing and viewed their quality of life as a better thing while co-residing with their adult children when the family had not reconstructed through parental remarriage, so there was no step parenthood involved, when the parents had positive attitudes towards the continued housing and support of the adult children, and lastly, when parents report good relationships with the children in general. The study also found that the older the co-resident adult child was, the greater the negative effects of the co-residence on the parents was. So the parent the parent perceives the co-residency as a more of a negative thing when the adult child was older. So basically, with the children's age, the surviving co-resident household became increasingly unrepresentative of parents with adult children and are increasingly more likely than empty nest parents to have a history of positive relationships with adult children. This study also found few negative effects among elderly parents with co-resident middle-aged children, which was a relatively rare living arrangement for both generations. The study also found that parental well-being in the co-resident living arrangement was depressed by children's unemployment and continuing financial dependency. Co-residence becomes more burdensome as the share of children's basic needs paid for by parents increases. So basically, they found that children's unemployment and continual financial dependency led to the co-residency as more of a burdensome thing on the parent. They also found that parents whose adult children moved back home after marital breakups reported more negative effects of co-residency than did parents of children who were never married. This study also found that middle-class parents found co-residency as a more of a burdensome thing than did those parents of lower socioeconomic status. And this can be explained because middle-class parents might have or are more likely to have higher expectations of their children and of self-development and life opportunities rather than lower socioeconomic status parents. So that is why that is the explanation for that result, for that finding. Basically, this whole study was just examined that adult children who still live at home, that when there's an adult child who still lives at home, there is considerable vulnerability in parents' responses to the living arrangement, and that there's a multitude of child and parent characteristics that moderate parental experiences. So basically, the whole study mainly found that how parents perceive the living arrangement of having an adult child co-residing with them can vary drastically because it all depends on different characteristics of that child and parent.